On my 27th birthday, at a restaurant in the heart of San Francisco, my life unraveled in front of everyone. The room was glowing with chandeliers, crystal glasses clinking, waiters in crisp uniforms gliding past expensive tables. My parents had insisted on this special celebration, even though I had begged for something simple. I thought it was about love, about family. Then my grandfather, Edward Prescott, the real estate titan whose name was whispered with awe across the West Coast, walked in, commanding the entire dining room with his presence. People straightened in their chairs. Even my father nearly dropped his wine glass. Edward sat beside me, kissed my cheek, and with that intimidating mix of affection and authority, asked loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "So, Vanessa, how's the apartment? Comfortable?" The question struck me like a thunderbolt. My heart raced. My lips trembled as I whispered back, "What apartment?" My parents froze. My mother's hands went pale around her fork. My father's eyes darted to the chandelier, anywhere but toward Edward. Silence devoured the room. Then Edward's smile faded. His voice turned sharp, slicing through the atmosphere like glass. Then where did the money go? The clinking, the laughter, the background chatter, all of it vanished. Every head turned toward us. And suddenly, it wasn't me who was being stared at anymore. It was them, my parents. That was the night I discovered the life I thought I had. The struggles, the loans, the late nights crying over unpaid bills had been built on a lie. A betrayal so deep it had stolen not just millions from my future, but years from my past. I used to believe that struggle built character. That's what my parents always told me. "Vanessa, nothing worth having comes easy." My father, Daniel Carter, would lecture whenever I complained about working 2 jobs while juggling a full course load at art school. He'd be sitting in his leather recliner, expensive scotch in hand, looking every bit the successful financial advisor he claimed to be. My mother, Linda, would nod in agreement, her manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. "Your father and I worked for everything we have. That's how you learn the value of a dollar." Our family dynamic was simple. They lived comfortably in their Palo Alto home with its immaculate garden and swimming pool, while I shared a cramped apartment in San Francisco's Mission District with my best friend Olivia. I slept on a mattress that sagged in the middle, under a ceiling that leaked when it rained. I ate ramen 5 nights a week and picked up graphic design gigs that barely covered my portion of the rent. But I never complained. Not really. I believed them when they said this was how life worked, that their comfort was earned and my struggle was necessary. "We're not being cruel, sweetheart," my mother once said after I'd called her crying about not being able to afford my textbooks. "We're preparing you for reality." When I graduated from art school with $70,000 in student debt, they gave me a finance self-help book as a gift. No help with the loans, no assistance with my first apartment security deposit. Just a book with a bright cover promising financial freedom in 5 simple steps. I remember holding it in my hands at my graduation dinner, fighting back tears while they clinked champagne glasses and told me how proud they were of my independence. "You're going to thank us someday," my father said, his arm around my mother's shoulder. "This tough love is the greatest gift we could give you." I believed them. That was my first mistake. The night of my 27th birthday, I arrived at Quince, one of San Francisco's most exclusive restaurants, feeling both touched and a little annoyed. Touched because my parents had insisted on celebrating my birthday properly for once. Annoyed because I knew I couldn't afford to contribute a dime to this extravagant dinner, which made me feel like a child rather than an adult. I wore my one good dress, a navy blue number I'd splurged on during a rare sale at Nordstrom Rack. My hair was pulled back in a simple bun, my makeup minimal. I'd never mastered the art of contouring or smoky eyes like my mother had, but I felt presentable enough, even in a place where women draped themselves in designer labels that cost more than my monthly rent. "There she is," my father called out when I entered the private dining room they'd reserved. He stood up to kiss my cheek, smelling of expensive cologne and confidence. "The birthday girl." My mother embraced me next, her diamond bracelet cold against my skin. "You look lovely, darling, though we really should take you shopping soon." I smiled tightly. "This dress is fine, Mom." "Of course it is," she said, but her eyes said otherwise. The table was set for 5, which confused me. "Are we expecting someone else?" My parents exchanged a glance. "Your grandfather might stop by," my father said casually, though I noticed how his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. "Grandpa Edward?" I blinked in surprise. I haven't seen him in years. Edward Prescott was my mother's father. a real estate magnate whose name adorned buildings across the West Coast. He and my mother had a complicated relationship. At least that's what she always told me. Growing up, I saw him only at major holidays and the occasional family function. He was always kind to me, bringing thoughtful gifts and asking genuine questions about my interests. But there was a distance there I could never quite understand. "Well, he wanted to wish you a happy birthday," my mother said, her voice unnaturally high. "Isn't that nice?" I nodded, though something about their behavior felt off. My father kept checking his watch. My mother's laugh was too loud, her gestures too expansive. They ordered champagne, expensive champagne, and toasted to my health, my happiness, my future. "To our brilliant daughter," my father proclaimed, 27 years old and making her own way in the world. "Against all odds," my mother added, with a strange emphasis that made me frown. I was about to ask what she meant when the dining room door opened and a hush fell over the entire restaurant. Edward Prescott had that effect on people. At 78, he still stood tall and commanding, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his suit clearly tailored to his frame. Behind him followed a woman in her 40s, Allison Reed, his personal assistant for as long as I could remember, and a man in a sharp suit carrying a leather briefcase, someone I didn't recognize. My grandfather's eyes found mine immediately, and his stern expression softened into a genuine smile. "Vanessa," he said, crossing the room with purposeful strides. He bent to kiss my cheek, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Happy birthday, my dear." "Thank you, Grandpa," I replied, surprised by the emotion in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you tonight." "I wouldn't miss it," he said, taking the seat beside me. He nodded curtly to my parents. "Daniel, Linda." They murmured greetings, their faces strained. I noticed my mother's knuckles were white around her clutch purse. "This is David Rosen," my grandfather introduced the man with the briefcase. "My attorney." "An attorney at my birthday dinner?" I glanced questioningly at my parents, but they were suddenly very interested in the menu. The waiter came to take our orders. My parents insisted on the tasting menu with wine pairings, the most expensive option available. I squirmed, thinking of my credit card already stretched to its limit, but before I could object, my grandfather waved away my concern. "This is my gift to you, Vanessa," he said. "Please, enjoy yourself tonight." As the first course arrived, something delicate involving caviar and gold leaf, my grandfather turned to me with that direct gaze that made powerful business. Executives squirm in their seats. "So, Vanessa, how's the apartment? Comfortable?" Time seemed to freeze in that moment. My fork suspended midair, my breath caught in my throat. I looked at my grandfather's expectant expression, then at my parents' suddenly pale faces. "What apartment?" I asked, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. The transformation in my grandfather's face was immediate and terrifying. His eyes, warm with affection just seconds ago, turned to ice. The lines around his mouth deepened into furrows of rage. He didn't look at me anymore, his gaze fixed on my parents with such intensity that I almost expected them to burst into flames. "Then where?" he said, each word precise and cutting. "Did the money go?" My father cleared his throat. "Edward, perhaps this isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place," my grandfather interrupted, his voice like steel. "I've waited 2 years since her 25th birthday, giving you the benefit of the doubt. No more." The man he'd introduced as his attorney quietly opened his briefcase and removed a folder. He placed it in front of me with a sympathetic nod. "What's going on?" I asked, looking from face to face. My mother reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, your grandfather is being dramatic. This is a simple misunderstanding. There's nothing simple about embezzling $8 million from your own daughter." My grandfather cut in, and I felt the room spin around me. "8 million? What?" I stuttered, unable to process his words. David Rosen, the attorney, spoke for the first time. "Ms. Carter, when you were born, your grandfather established a trust fund in your name. $5 million to be held in trust until your 25th birthday, with your parents as trustees." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "That's impossible. I would have known. The trustees, your parents, were legally obligated to inform you and transfer control of the assets to you on your 25th birthday," he continued, his voice professionally detached. "That was 2 years ago." My mother's face crumpled. "We were going to tell her." "When?" my grandfather demanded. "After you'd spent every last penny? After you'd mortgaged the apartment I purchased for her as well?" "Apartment?" I echoed faintly. David Rosen nodded. A property in Pacific Heights, purchased in your name, when you turned 18, with the intention of you taking possession when you completed college. The mortgage papers are in the folder. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, property deeds, all with my name on them. Transactions I had never authorized. Withdrawals I had never made. A life I had never lived. I don't understand, I whispered, though the truth was beginning to take horrible shape in my mind. If I had this money, if I had an apartment, why was I struggling? Why was I working 2 jobs? Why do I have student loans? My father couldn't meet my eyes. My mother was crying silently now, mascara creating dark rivers down her carefully made-up face. The trust was worth over $8 million by your 25th birthday with compound interest and investments, David explained gently. As of last month, only $300,000 remains. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. All those years of scraping by, all those nights I'd lain awake wondering how I'd pay my bills, all those times I'd swallowed my pride and accepted my parents' lectures about financial responsibility while You stole from me, I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. You let me struggle while We didn't steal, my father insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. We borrowed. We were going to pay it back. With what? My grandfather scoffed. The money you lost on those ridiculous investment schemes? The vacation homes? The cars? Or perhaps with the contents of those suitcases you've packed for Panama? My head snapped up. Panama? David slid another document toward me, airline confirmations for my parents, departing the following day for Panama City. They were planning to disappear, my grandfather said quietly. I had Allison check. They've been liquidating assets for weeks. I looked at my parents, these people I'd trusted, respected, even when their tough love felt cruel, and saw strangers. My father's jaw was clenched in defiance. My mother wouldn't look at me at all. How could you do this to me? I asked, my voice breaking. All those years I struggled. I believed you when you said I needed to learn the value of money. I believed you when you said you'd earned everything you had. We did earn it, my father insisted. We managed that trust brilliantly for years. It wasn't yours to manage once she turned 25, my grandfather thundered, causing nearby diners to stare. It wasn't yours to spend on your lifestyle at all. I thought of their pool renovations last year, their new cars, the Napa Valley wine tours they were always posting on social media, the remodeled kitchen with its marble countertops, all while I'd been eating ramen in a leaking apartment, working overtime to make rent. What happens now? I asked, looking at the attorney. David's expression was grave. That depends on you, Ms. Carter. Your grandfather has already frozen what remains of the trust and the apartment's rental income. Your parents have committed fraud and embezzlement, criminal charges that could result in significant prison time. Or you can allow them the chance to make a restitution, my grandfather finished. They would need to sign over assets, properties, vehicles, investments, anything purchased with your money. It won't recover everything they've squandered, but it would be something. I looked at my parents, these people who had raised me, who had shaped my worldview, who had betrayed me in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. And if I choose restitution? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Then they avoid prison, my grandfather said simply. Though not consequences. I've already removed your mother from my will and Daniel from any position in my companies. My mother let out a small, wounded sound. My father's face hardened into a mask of resentment. You have to understand, my mother pleaded, finally meeting my eyes. We never meant to hurt you. The money was there and we had plans, dreams. So did I interrupted, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. Dreams I couldn't pursue because I was too busy working multiple jobs to pay for basics. Dreams I gave up because you convinced me they were impractical, unaffordable. The waiter approached with our next course, took one look at the tableau of tension, and retreated hastily. I pushed my chair back from the table. The room was spinning, my chest tight with a mixture of rage and grief I couldn't begin to process. I need air, I said, standing up on unsteady legs. My grandfather nodded. Allison will go with you. His assistant appeared at my side immediately, her calm presence somehow grounding in the midst of chaos. She guided me toward the door, her hand gentle on my elbow. Before we left the private dining room, I turned back to look at my parents. These strangers who had stolen not just my money, but years of my life that could never be recovered. No prison, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But I want everything back that can be returned. And I never want to see either of you again. As Allison led me out into the cool San Francisco night, I felt the foundations of my life. Everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, my place in the world, crumble beneath me. The night air hit my face like a slap, cool and clarifying. San Francisco's fog was rolling in, wrapping the city in its ghostly embrace. I leaned against the brick wall outside the restaurant, struggling to breathe, to think, to process the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in my life. Here, Allison said quietly, offering me a bottle of water she'd somehow procured. Small sips. I took the bottle with shaking hands. Did you know? All this time? Allison hesitated, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. I suspected something was wrong when your grandfather asked me to look into the trust last month, but the extent of it, she shook her head. No one imagined they would go this far. I laughed, a hollow sound that scraped my throat. I can't believe I was so stupid. All those years watching them live like that while my voice broke. I believed everything they told me. That's not stupidity, Vanessa. That's trust. Allison's voice softened. Children are supposed to be able to trust their parents. The restaurant door opened, spilling warm light onto the sidewalk. David Rosen, my grandfather's attorney, emerged with his briefcase. His face was neutral, but his eyes held genuine sympathy. Your grandfather is settling the bill, he said. He thought you might want to leave before your parents come out. I nodded, grateful for the consideration. The thought of facing them, again, of hearing more excuses or justifications, made my stomach churn. What happens now? I asked, my mind spinning with practical questions. My entire concept of reality had shifted, but rent was still due next week. I still had work deadlines. Life would continue somehow in this new and terrible landscape. Technically, I represent your grandfather's interests, David said carefully. But if you'd like, I can recommend several excellent attorneys who could represent you in the recovery process. I don't have money for attorneys, I said automatically, then stopped as the irony hit me. I didn't think I had money for attorneys. The remaining funds in your trust, about $300,000, have been secured, he explained. Your grandfather has instructed me to provide you with immediate access to those funds while we pursue the recovery of the rest. $300,000. The number floated in my mind, simultaneously enormous and pitiful, a fraction of what should have been mine, but more money than I'd ever had access to in my life. And the apartment? I asked, remembering the property documents I'd seen. In Pacific Heights? Your property, David confirmed. Your parents have been collecting rental income from it for years, but the tenant's lease expires next month. The timing is fortuitous. I tried to imagine myself living in Pacific Heights, one of San Francisco's most exclusive neighborhoods. It felt like a fantasy, disconnected from the reality of my cramped Mission District apartment with its temperamentally plumbing and paper-thin walls. I'd like to see it, I said suddenly. Tonight. Can I see it tonight? David and Allison exchanged glances. I believe that can be arranged, Allison said, pulling out her phone. I'll call a car. 40 minutes later, I stood on the sidewalk in front of a beautiful Victorian building. 3 stories of historic architecture updated with modern sensibilities. The fog had thickened, giving the street an otherworldly quality. The streetlights haloed in misty gold. Top floor, David said, handling me a set of keys. The property manager leaves these with your grandfather's office. I climbed the stairs in silence, each step taking me further from the life I'd known. The building was immaculately maintained, the hallway carpets plush, the lighting warm and welcoming. When I reached the door of what was apparently my apartment, I hesitated, key in hand. Would you like us to come in with you? Allison asked gently. I shook my head. I need to do this alone. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I stepped inside and fumbled for a light switch, illuminating a space that stopped my breath. High ceilings with crown molding, hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city lights glimmering through the fog. The apartment was furnished, not with the tenant's things, I realized, but with pieces that had been chosen with care. A modern sectional sofa in soft gray, bookcases filled with art books and classics, a dining table of polished wood, artwork on the walls that spoke of taste and thoughtfulness. I moved through the rooms in a daze, the kitchen with its marble countertops and high-end appliances, the bathroom with a soaking tub and heated floors, the bedroom with its king-sized bed and walk-in closet. On the bedside table, I found a framed photograph that made my heart stutter. Me, at perhaps 5 years old, sitting on my grandfather's lap, both of us laughing at something outside the frame. I had no memory of the moment, no recollection of ever seeing the picture before. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching the photograph, as the full weight of my parents' betrayal crashed over me. They hadn't just stolen money, they'd stolen connections, memories, relationships. They'd constructed an entire false narrative about my family, about my place in it, about what I deserved from life. A soft knock at the door startled me. I wiped my eyes and went to answer it, finding Allison standing there with a small overnight bag. "I took the liberty of stopping by a store," she said. "Just some essentials. Toothbrush, pajamas, a change of clothes. I guessed your size, I hope that's not presumptuous." The simple kindness undid me completely. I burst into tears, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of me. Allison stepped inside and closed the door, setting the bag down to awkwardly pat my shoulder. "I'm sorry," I gasped between sobs. I'm not." "You don't need to apologize," she said firmly. "Anyone would be overwhelmed." When I finally calmed down, wiping my face with the tissues she produced from her seemingly bottomless purse, Allison gestured toward the kitchen. "There's food in the refrigerator and pantry. We keep it stocked for when your grandfather visits the city. David is downstairs speaking with the property manager. He'll explain that the current tenants will need to be informed of the change in circumstances." I nodded, still struggling to process that this place, this beautiful, perfect place, was mine, had been mine for years, without my knowledge. "My grandfather visits here?" I asked, latching onto that detail. Allison's expression softened. "This was meant to be your home when you finished college. When that didn't happen, he would come here sometimes. I think it helped him feel connected to you." "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since the restaurant. "About the trust, the apartment, any of it? Why wait until now?" Allison considered her words carefully. "Your grandfather respects boundaries, perhaps to a fault. When your parents insisted they wanted to raise you without his interference, without his money influencing your development," he reluctantly agreed. "But they were using his money the whole time," I said bitterly. "Yes," she acknowledged. "Though I believe the arrangement began with genuine intentions. But as you got older, questions arose. When you struggled through college with jobs and loans, he became suspicious. When your 25th birthday passed with no change in your circumstances." She shook her head. "He hired investigators. What they found led to tonight. I thought of all the times I'd seen my grandfather over the years, distant but kind, always asking about my studies, my work, my dreams, never interfering, never offering help, respecting what he thought were my parents' wishes. And all the while, they were stealing from me, from him, from the relationship we might have had." "What do I do now?" I asked, voicing the question that seemed impossible to answer. "Tonight, you rest," Allison said pragmatically. "Tomorrow, you begin the process of reclaiming what's yours." As she left me alone in the apartment, my apartment, I wandered to the windows, looking out at the city lights glimmering through the fog. Somewhere out there, my parents were facing the consequences of their actions. Somewhere out there was the life I'd been living just hours ago, a life built on lies and unnecessary struggle. But here, in this beautiful space that had been waiting for me all along, I felt the first faint stirrings of something unexpected, possibility. The next morning, I woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a blissful moment, I couldn't remember where I was or why. Then reality crashed back, the restaurant, my grandfather's question, the devastating revelations that followed. I lay in the wad, king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to organize my thoughts. How did one begin to rebuild a life that had been revealed as a fiction? Where did I even start? My phone, plugged in on the nightstand, buzzed with incoming messages. 27 missed calls from my parents. Dozens of text messages, alternating between apologies, explanations, and accusations. I scrolled through them with a strange detachment, as if reading a story about someone else's life. "We only wanted what was best for you. You don't understand the pressure we were under. This is all Edward's fault. He's trying to turn you against us. Please, sweetheart, don't do this. We're still your parents." That last one made me laugh, a harsh sound in the quiet apartment. Parents. The word felt hollow now, stripped of its meaning. What kind of parents watch their child struggle, sacrifice, and suffer while living off money that should have been hers? A text from an unknown number interrupted my bitter thoughts. Mr. Prescott would like to know if you're available for breakfast at 10. Car can pick you up if convenient. Allison. I texted back a simple, yes, then forced myself out of bed. The bathroom was as luxurious as I'd remembered from my dazed exploration the night before. Heated marble floors, a rainfall shower with perfect pressure, plush towels that felt like clouds against my skin. I dressed in the clothes Allison had brought, simple black pants and a blue blouse that fit surprisingly well, and tried to make sense of my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same as yesterday, but everything had changed. The woman staring back at me owned an apartment in Pacific Heights, had a trust fund, had been lied to her entire life. At precisely 10 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Car waiting downstairs. The black town car glided through San Francisco's morning traffic, taking me to the financial district where my grandfather's company occupied the top floors of a gleaming high-rise. I'd been there only once before, for a brief and awkward visit during my college years. Allison met me in the lobby, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "Good morning, Miss Carter. I hope you were comfortable last night." "Please call me Vanessa," I said, following her to a private elevator. "And yes, the apartment is overwhelming. In a good way." She offered a small smile. "Your grandfather is waiting in his office. David Rosen will be joining us shortly." The elevator opened directly into a reception area decorated in muted grays and blues. The receptionist nodded respectfully as Allison led me past, down a hallway lined with original artwork, to a set of double doors at the end. My grandfather's office was exactly what I would have expected. Spacious but not ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the bay. Edward Prescott rose from behind his desk when we entered, his face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Vanessa," he said, coming around to embrace me. "Did you sleep at all?" "Surprisingly, yes," I admitted, returning his hug. "I think I was in shock." He nodded, understanding. Shock is a mercy sometimes. It gives us time to prepare for the pain. He gestured toward a seating area where coffee and breakfast pastries had been arranged. "Shall we?" We settled into comfortable chairs, Allison discreetly withdrawing to her desk just outside the office doors. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of yesterday's revelations hanging between us. "I owe you an explanation," my grandfather finally said, his voice grave. "And an apology." "You didn't do anything wrong," I protested. "I did," he insisted. "I established the trust with the best of intentions, but I was too hands-off. I respected your parents' wishes to raise you without interference, without the burden of wealth shaping your character. I believed them when they said they wanted you to develop independence, a work ethic, resilience." He poured coffee for us, both, his movements deliberate. "I never imagined they would take it so far, that they would let you struggle through college with loans and multiple jobs while living off the very funds meant to secure your future. By the time I realized something was wrong, the damage was done." "Why didn't you tell me directly?" I asked, the question that had kept me awake for part of the night. "Why wait until last night?" Edward sighed heavily. "I needed proof, concrete evidence. Your parents were well respected in their circles. Linda is my daughter. I wanted to be absolutely certain before making accusations that would destroy your family." "They destroyed our family," I said quietly. "Not you." He reached across to squeeze my hand. "You have every right to your anger, Vanessa. Every right to feel betrayed. But I want you to know that whatever happens next is entirely your decision." The office doors opened and David Rosen entered, carrying his now familiar leather briefcase. He nodded a greeting to us both. "I've prepared the documents we discussed, Mr. Prescott," he said, taking a seat and opening his briefcase. My grandfather turned to me. "David has been working through the night to prepare options for you. The legal path forward, should you choose to take it." David laid out several folders on the coffee table. "Ms. Carter, there are essentially 3 approaches we can take." His voice was professional, but not unkind. "First, criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. This would likely result in prison time for both your parents." I flinched at the word prison, despite everything. They had betrayed me completely, but the thought of them in jail cells still felt surreal. "Second," David continued, "civil litigation to recover assets. This avoids criminal penalties but would still involve the courts, public records, potentially media attention." "And the third option?" I asked. "A private settlement, Your parents sign over assets purchased with your trust funds, properties, investments, vehicles, anything of value, and in exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges. I stared at the folders, each representing a different version of justice, a different path forward. How much could be recovered? Based on our preliminary investigation, approximately 4 million in tangible assets. David replied. The rest appears to have been spent. Travel, gambling debts, luxury goods that have depreciated significantly. Half of what should have been mine. Still more money than I'd ever imagined having. But the loss stung nonetheless. They've been trying to contact me, I said, glancing at my phone. Non-stop since last night. You don't have to speak to them, my grandfather assured me. Whatever you decide, you don't owe them your time or attention. I picked up the folder labeled Settlement, leafing through the documents inside. Properties in Lake Tahoe and Palm Springs, investment accounts, cars, jewelry, all purchased with my money, all enjoyed by my parents while I worked overtime to make rent. I don't want them in prison, I said finally, setting the folder down. But I want what's mine, and I never want to see them again. My grandfather nodded, his expression a mixture of sadness and pride. Then that's what we'll do. David made some notes. I'll arrange a meeting with their attorneys. Given the evidence we have, I anticipate they'll accept the settlement terms rather than risk criminal charges. A weight lifted from my shoulders, not the betrayal or the hurt, those remained heavy as ever, but the burden of decision. I had chosen a path forward, one that felt right despite the pain. What will you do now? My grandfather asked gently. With your life, I mean. You have options you didn't know about yesterday. I looked out at the bay, sparkling in the morning sunlight. The future that had seemed so limited, so constrained by financial necessity, now stretched before me with dizzying possibility. I don't know yet, I admitted. Everything's changed so quickly. I need time to think, to process. Of course, he said, squeezing my hand again. There's no rush. The apartment is yours for as long as you want it. The remaining trust funds are being transferred to accounts in your name only. You can take all the time you need. For the first time since my birthday dinner, I felt something like hope stirring beneath the pain. Not happiness, that was still far away, but possibility, a chance to rebuild on truth rather than lies. Thank you, I said, looking at my grandfather with new eyes. For everything, for uncovering the truth. The truth was always your birthright, Vanessa, he replied softly. I'm just sorry it took so long to find its way to you. In the weeks that followed, I moved through my days in a strange limbo between my old life and whatever my new one would become. I gave notice at my cramped Mission District apartment, packed the few possessions that mattered to me, and officially moved into the Pacific Heights residence that had been mine all along. Olivia, my roommate and closest friend, helped me pack, her expression oscillating between shock and outrage as I explained what had happened. I always thought your parents were kind of assholes, she said bluntly, sealing a box of books with packing tape. But this is next-level betrayal. How are you not screaming from rooftops? I shrugged, wrapping a framed print in bubble wrap. Screaming won't change anything. Besides, I'm still trying to process it all. Well, when you're ready to scream, call me. I'll bring wine and join you. The truth was, I didn't know how to feel. Anger came in waves, washing over me at unexpected moments. When I found my old student loan statements, when I remembered the times I'd skipped meals to make rent, when I thought of my parents living in luxury while feeding me lies about building character through struggle. But beneath the anger was a deeper, more complicated emotion: grief. I was mourning not just the money and opportunities I'd lost, but the parents I thought I had, the family I believed in, the narrative of my life that had shaped my identity. Who was I? If not the struggling artist who'd earned everything through hard work and sacrifice? Who was I, if not the daughter of principled parents who valued character over comfort? These questions followed me as I settled into my new home, as I explored rooms that still felt borrowed rather than mine. I spent hours just sitting by the windows, watching fog roll in over the city, trying to reconcile the person I'd been with the person I might become. 3 weeks after my birthday, I received an email from David Rosen. The subject line was simple: settlement complete. The message contained no emotion, just facts. My parents had signed over all assets purchased with trust funds. The properties would be liquidated or transferred to my name, as I preferred. The investment accounts had already been transferred. The cars would be sold at auction. It was done. Attached was a single PDF, a letter from my parents, forwarded by their attorney. My finger hovered over the file, trembling slightly. Did I want to read their excuses? Their justifications? Would anything they said matter now? I closed the email without opening the attachment. That evening, I sat in my grandfather's office, a glass of scotch in my hand that I wasn't drinking. The settlement papers were spread across his desk, each page representing another piece of my stolen legacy being returned. What will happen to them now? I asked, breaking a long silence. My grandfather looked up from the documents he'd been reviewing. They've downsized to a condo in Sacramento. Your father is looking for work outside the financial sector. Your mother has family there. I nodded, trying to picture them in a modest condo after years of luxury living. It was hard to imagine my mother without her designer clothes, my father without his expensive cars and club memberships. They'll be fine, Vanessa, my grandfather said, reading my expression. They're not destitute, just living within more honest means. I ran my finger along the edge of my glass. I keep waiting to feel satisfied or vindicated or something, but I just feel empty. Justice rarely brings the closure we hope for, he said, quietly, especially when it involves family. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the lines of strain around his eyes, the weariness in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. This had cost him too. His only daughter had betrayed him, betrayed me, damaged his legacy. I'm sorry, I said impulsively. About Mom, about all of this. He shook his head firmly. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing at all. What do I do now? I asked, the question that had become my constant companion. I have this apartment, this money, but I don't know who I am anymore. Who do you want to be? He countered gently. The question hung in the air between us, profound in its simplicity. Who did I want to be? For so long, my identity had been shaped by struggle, by the narrative my parents had constructed. The scrappy graphic designer who worked harder than anyone. The girl who couldn't afford risks or dreams. I don't know, I admitted. I've been so focused on survival that I never really thought about thriving. Then that's where you start, he said. Not with the money or the property, but with the question. What would you do if limitations were removed? What would you create if failure wasn't financially devastating? The possibilities made me dizzy. I'd been freelancing as a graphic designer because it paid the bills, but my true passion had always been illustration, creating narrative art that told stories. I'd relegated it to a hobby, something I did in stolen moments between paying gigs because it wasn't practical. I'd illustrate, I said slowly. I'd create the kind of art that tells stories. Maybe children's books, or graphic novels, or... I trailed off, embarrassed by the sudden rush of enthusiasm. But my grandfather was nodding, his eyes alight with interest. Show me, he said simply. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my private Instagram account where I posted illustrations that almost no one saw. Intricate fantasy worlds, characters, with complex emotions, scenes that told stories without words. My grandfather studied each image with careful attention, his expression thoughtful. When he handed the phone back, there was something like pride in his eyes. You have a gift, Vanessa. A real gift. It doesn't pay the bills, I said automatically, then caught myself. I mean, it didn't. Before, he repeated. But now. The word hung between us, full of possibility. Now I had financial security. Now I had time. Now I had the freedom to take risks, to pursue what mattered to me without the constant pressure of survival. Now I can try, I said, my voice stronger. Really try, without compromise. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since my birthday night. That's all anyone can do. Try, without compromise. As I left his office that evening, something had shifted inside me. The betrayal was still there, a wound that would take time to heal. But alongside it, something new was growing. A sense of possibility, of ownership not just of the material things that had been returned to me, but of my own narrative. In the weeks that followed, I transformed my apartment into a working studio. I converted the second bedroom into an art space, installing a professional drafting table, investing in quality supplies, setting up proper lighting. I enrolled in a master class with an illustrator I'd always admired, no longer held back by the prohibitive cost. I gave notice to my regular clients, explaining that I was shifting my focus to illustration work. Some were disappointed, others understood. All of them wished me well. At night, I would stand on my balcony, looking out at the city lights, and feel the strangest mixture of emotions. lingering anger at my parents, gratitude toward my grandfather, and underneath it all, a growing excitement about the future that was finally, truly mine to shape. One morning, I received a text from Allison. Your grandfather mentioned your illustration work. I have a friend at Chronicle Books who might be interested in seeing your portfolio. Would you like an introduction? I stared at the message, my heart racing. Chronicle Books was one of the premier publishers in San Francisco, known for beautiful, thoughtfully designed books. An introduction there would be invaluable. My first instinct was to decline, to prove I could do this on my own, without connections or advantages. Then I caught myself. That was the old thinking, the narrative my parents had instilled in me, the false gospel of struggle as virtue. I would love that, I texted back. Thank you. That afternoon, as I worked on a new series of illustrations, a story about a child discovering a hidden world that existed alongside our own, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for permission to be who I wanted to be. I was no longer defining myself by what I lacked or what had been taken from me. For the first time in my life, I was defining myself by what I could create, by what I could give back to the world. And in that realization, I found something I hadn't expected to find so soon after my world had shattered. Purpose. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after my birthday revelation. I was at my drafting table, working on final illustrations for a children's book proposal, when my phone chimed with the notification. From Linda Carter. Subject, please read. The sight of my mother's name made my stomach clench. I set down my pen and took a deep breath, reminding myself that she couldn't hurt me anymore. Whatever she had to say, I could choose whether to engage with it. I opened the email. Vanessa, I know you haven't opened our previous letters, and I understand why. What we did was unforgivable. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness, but to let you know that your father and I will be in San Francisco this weekend for your cousin Megan's wedding. I understand if you don't want to see us, but I wanted you to have the information in case you're attending. Mom. I stared at the screen, anger and anxiety coiling in my chest. Megan's wedding. I'd received the invitation months ago, but had been so caught up in the chaos of my life's upheaval that I'd forgotten to RSVP. Megan was my mother's niece, a sweet woman a few years older than me who'd always been kind during the few family gatherings where we'd intersected. I hadn't considered that my parents would be there. Of course they would be. Linda was Megan's aunt. The wedding would be the first time I might see them since that fateful night at Quince. My phone rang, startling me. My grandfather's name flashed on the screen. Did you get Linda's email? He asked without preamble when I answered. Just now, I said, surprised. How did you know? She contacted me first to ask if it would be appropriate to warn you they'd be at the wedding. His voice was carefully neutral. I told her you deserved the courtesy of advance notice. Are you going? To the wedding? I was invited, yes. I hadn't decided yet. A pause. Will it influence your decision if I attend? I considered this. No, this is something I need to navigate. Myself. That's what I thought you'd say. There was a note of pride in his voice. For what it's worth, I think you should go. Not for them, but for yourself. And for Megan, who's always spoken highly of you. After we hung up, I sat staring at the invitation I'd unearthed from a stack of mail. Saturday at 4, the Legion of Honor. A beautiful venue for a spring wedding. I sent in my RSVP, then returned to my illustrations, trying to focus on the work rather than the confrontation that loomed ahead. By Saturday, I had cycled through every possible emotion about seeing my parents again. Anger, anxiety, curiosity. Even in unguarded moments, a traitorous flicker of longing for the family I'd thought we were. I dressed with care in a simple but elegant navy dress. My hair swept up, minimal. Jewelry, armor of a sort, projecting confidence and composure I wasn't entirely sure I felt. The Legion of Honor was stunning in the late afternoon light, its neoclassical columns glowing golden against the blue sky. Guests were already gathering in the entrance courtyard, a sea of spring colors and festive attire. I spotted my mother first. She was standing near a column, wearing a conservative, pale blue dress, her hair styled simply. She looked older than I remembered, more subdued. My father was beside her, his once commanding presence diminished somehow, his shoulders slightly stooped. For a moment I considered turning around, leaving before they saw me. Then my mother looked up, her eyes finding mine across the courtyard, and it was too late. I made my way toward them, keeping my expression neutral, my steps measured. Other guests glanced between us, curious or concerned, News of our family's fracture had inevitably spread through the extended family grapevine. "Vanessa," my mother said when I reached them, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," I replied, my own voice cool and steady. "Hello, Dad." He nodded, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Vanessa." The awkward silence that followed was mercifully interrupted by the arrival of Megan, radiant in her wedding dress, exclaiming with genuine delight at seeing me. "You came! I wasn't sure you would." She hugged me warmly. "Thank you. It means so much to have you here." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, returning her embrace. "You look incredible." The ceremony was lovely, set against the backdrop of the museum's gorgeous court of honor. I sat several rows behind my parents, focusing on the joy of the couple exchanging vows, on the beauty of the music and flowers, on anything but the two people whose betrayal had reshaped my life. At the reception, I mingled with distant relatives and family friends, accepting condolences from those who knew fragments of what had happened, deflecting questions from those who didn't. I danced with my grandfather, who had indeed decided to attend, his steady presence a comfort amid the emotional minefield. I was at the bar, waiting for a glass of wine, when my father appeared beside me. "Vanessa," he said, his voice tight with tension. "Can we talk? Just for a moment?" I considered refusing. I had that right, but something in me needed closure, needed to face him directly, without lawyers or settlements between us. "5 minutes," I said. "Outside." We found a quiet spot on the terrace overlooking the stunning view of the Golden Gate Bridge. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. In another context, it would have been beautiful. "You're looking well," he said awkwardly. "I heard you're focusing on your illustration now." "Who told you that?" "Your grandfather. We still communicate, occasionally, about you." I raised an eyebrow. "And he tells you things? About my life?" "Nothing private," he assured me hastily. "Just that you're doing well? That you've found your path?" I nodded, waiting. He hadn't asked me outside to make small talk about my career. "Vanessa, I know. Nothing I can say will undo what happened," he finally began, his voice strained. "The choices your mother and I made, they were wrong, inexcusable. Then why did you make them?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. "Why did you watch me struggle when you didn't have to? When you were living off money that was meant for me?" He looked out at the bridge, his profile harsh in the eye, fading light. "It started small, using the trust to cover a bad investment. Just temporarily, we told ourselves. We'd pay it back before you ever knew." He shook his head. "But then it became easier to do it again. And again. Until the lines blurred completely." "And the apartment?" I pressed. "The place Grandpa bought for me?" "By then, we were in too deep, using the rental income to maintain the lifestyle we'd built, telling ourselves we deserved it for raising you, for managing the trust." He looked down at his hands. "The rationalizations pile up until you can't see past them anymore." I studied him. This man who had once seemed so infallible to me, so wise and strong, now he just looked tired, diminished, hollowed out by his own choices. "Are you happy now?" he asked suddenly. "With your life?" The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? 3 months ago, I would have struggled to answer. But now, I'm finding my way, I said truthfully. Building something real. He nodded, pain and something like pride mingling in his expression. "Good. That's good." He hesitated, then added, "Your mother would like to speak with you too, if you're willing." I glanced back toward the reception, where I could see her watching us anxiously from just inside the doors. "Not tonight," I said, surprising myself with the lack of anger in my voice. "I'm not ready. Maybe someday, but not tonight." He accepted this with a nod. "For what it's worth, Vanessa, and I know it's worth very little, I am proud of the woman you've become. Not because of anything your mother and I did, but in spite of it." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Dad?" He paused, hope flashing briefly across his face. "I don't forgive you," I said clearly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm not going to let what you did define the rest of my life." It wasn't forgiveness. We were nowhere near that. But it was something. A statement of my own power. My refusal to be forever shaped by their betrayal. As I watched him walk away, rejoining my mother at the edge of the reception, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Not because anything had been resolved between us, but because I realized that resolution wasn't what I needed. What I needed was exactly what I'd claimed. The freedom to define my own life, to build something true and meaningful that had nothing to do with their lies or their theft or the false narrative they'd constructed around me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the terrace. Inside, the wedding celebration continued, joyful and unaware of the small drama that had played out in its margins. I took a deep breath of the cool evening air and turned back toward the light and music, toward the future I was finally free to create. 1 year. After my 27th birthday, the day my life had shattered and begun to rebuild itself, I stood in the crowded gallery of Chronicle books in downtown San Francisco, surrounded by the vibrant illustrations that had consumed my life for the past 12 months. Vanessa, there you are. Melanie Chen, my editor, appeared at my elbow with a glass of champagne. The children's book buyer from Barnes and Noble is dying to meet you. Your series is going to be their featured launch for the fall season. I took the champagne with a grateful smile, still slightly dazed by the reality of the night. My illustrated book series, The Hidden World of Evie Gray, was being celebrated at its official launch party. The walls around me were hung with framed prints from the books, showing a young girl discovering magical realities tucked within ordinary spaces. Libraries where books whispered their stories after hours, city parks where statues danced at midnight, apartment buildings with secret gardens on their rooftops. I'll be right there, I promised, needing a moment to absorb it all. When I'd started the project, I never imagined it would resonate so strongly with publishers, let alone lead to a 3-book deal. The concept had come from my own experience. The shock of discovering hidden truths beneath the surface of my ordinary life, the mix of pain and wonder in realizing that reality was both more brutal and more magical than I'd understood. You should be proud, a familiar voice said from behind me. I turned to find my grandfather, elegant as always in a perfectly tailored suit, studying one of the illustrations with genuine admiration. These are extraordinary, Vanessa. Thank you for coming, I said, embracing him warmly. It means everything to have you here. I wouldn't have missed it, he replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. At 79, Edward Prescott remained a commanding presence, though the events of the past year had softened something in him. Our relationship had deepened in ways I never could have anticipated, weekly dinners evolving into genuine friendship and mutual respect. Is Allison here? I asked, looking around for his assistant who had become something of a mentor to me. She's chatting with your agent by the bar, he said, nodding toward the corner where Allison was indeed engaged in animated conversation with Sophia, the literary agent who had helped transform my illustrations into a publishing deal. The gallery was filled with people from my new life, editors, fellow artists, friends I'd made in the creative community, and a few from my old life. Olivia from my Mission District days, beaming with pride as she examined every illustration. David Rosen, who had helped me navigate the legal aftermath of my parents' betrayal and stayed in touch as a friend. Even a few distant relatives who had reached out after learning the truth, offering support rather than judgment. Ms. Carter? A young woman approached, clutching a copy of my book. Would you mind signing this? It's for my daughter. She's fallen in love with Evie Gray. As I signed the book with a personal message, adding a small sketch of Evie beside my signature, I caught sight of a familiar figure hovering near the entrance. My mother, looking uncertain and out of place, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. My breath caught in my throat. We hadn't spoken since Megan's wedding 6 months ago, though she'd sent a card when Chronicle announced my book deal in Publishers Weekly. Just a simple note. Congratulations, I always knew you were talented. Signed, Mom, with no other message. Our eyes met across the crowded gallery. She didn't approach, just gave a small nod of acknowledgement, a tentative smile. I nodded back, neither welcoming nor dismissing her presence. Is that Linda? My grandfather asked, following my gaze. Yes, I said. I didn't know she was coming. I may have mentioned the event to her, he admitted. I hope that wasn't overstepping. I shook my head. It's a public event. She has every right to be here. The tension between my grandfather and his daughter remained, though it had evolved from raw anger to something more complex. Disappointment tempered by the inescapable bonds of family. They spoke occasionally now, mostly about me, a cautious rebuilding that would never restore what had been broken, but might, eventually, create something new in its place. Your work is being celebrated tonight, he said gently. That's all that matters. The rest will sort itself out in time. I squeezed his hand in gratitude, then excused myself to fulfill my duties as the guest of honor, circulating through the crowd, thanking people for coming, signing books, answering questions about my creative process. Throughout the evening, I was conscious of my mother's presence at the periphery, watching with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Pride, regret, longing, all mingled together. She didn't approach me, respecting the boundaries I'd established, content apparently just to witness this moment in my life. Near the end of the night, as the crowd began to thin, Melanie clinked a spoon against her glass to call for attention. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate not just a beautiful book, but a remarkable new talent, she said, gesturing toward me. Vanessa Carter's Hidden World series represents everything we value at Chronicle: imagination, heart, and the ability to see magic in everyday life. I predict we'll be celebrating many more of her creations in the years to come. Applause filled the gallery, and Melanie motioned for me to say a few words. I hadn't prepared anything, assuming the focus would be on the books rather than their creator. Thank you all for being here, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this night. I was working as a freelance graphic designer, treating my illustration as a hobby, something I did in stolen moments between paying jobs. I paused, my eyes finding my grandfather's supportive gaze, then briefly meeting my mother's across the room. Life has a way of revealing hidden truths when you least expect them. Sometimes those revelations are painful. Sometimes they force you to reconstruct everything you thought you knew about yourself and your place in the world. The room had gone quiet, people sensing that my words carried deeper meaning than a typical book launch speech. But sometimes those same revelations create space for new possibilities, for the person you were meant to be all along. I gestured to the illustrations surrounding us. Evie Gray's story is about finding wonder in unexpected places, about the courage to see truth even when it's difficult. It's a story I needed to tell, and I'm profoundly grateful that it has found its way to you. The applause that followed felt like a release, acknowledgement not just of my work, but of the journey that had produced it. As the event wound down, I found myself standing alone by the window, watching city lights glimmer through a light fog, a view that reminded me of my first night in the Pacific Heights apartment when everything had felt foreign and overwhelming. You were magnificent tonight, Allison said, appearing beside me with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. Edward couldn't be prouder. I accepted the glass with a smile. None of this would have happened without him, without you. She shook her head. The talent was always yours, Vanessa. You just needed the space and support to develop it. We stood in comfortable silence, watching as staff began to clear away empty glasses and rearrange furniture. Your mother is still here, Allison said quietly. She's waiting by the door. I think she wants to speak with you, but isn't sure if she should. I took a deep breath, weighing the moment. The anger that had once burned so fiercely had gradually transformed over the past year. Not into, forgiveness exactly, but into something less consuming. A recognition that holding on to rage only gave my parents continued power over my life. What would you do? I asked Allison, valuing her practical wisdom. She considered the question seriously. I think I would hear what she has to say. Not for her sake, but for yours. Closure takes many forms, Vanessa. Sometimes it comes from speaking your truth, and sometimes from listening to someone else's. I nodded, finished my champagne, and handed her the empty glass. You're right. It's time. I found my mother where Allison had indicated, standing uncertainly by the coat check, her purse clutched tightly in both hands. She looked up as I approached, hope and anxiety mingling in her expression. Vanessa, she said softly, the books are beautiful. You're incredibly talented. Thank you for coming, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I wouldn't have intruded, but your grandfather thought, he said it might be all right. She twisted her purse strap nervously. I just wanted to see your work, to be here for your big night even if from a distance. I studied her, this woman who had raised me, who had betrayed me, who was now standing before me looking smaller and older and deeply uncertain. The anger I'd expected to feel didn't materialize. Instead, I felt a strange calm, a sense that she no longer held any power to hurt me. Would you like to walk a bit? I asked impulsively. It's a nice night. Surprise flashed across her face, followed by cautious hope. I'd like that very much. We retrieved our coats and stepped out into the cool San Francisco evening. The city hummed around us, cars passing, people laughing as they spilled out of restaurants and bars, the distant clang of a cable car. We walked in silence for a block, adjusting to this new dynamic between us. Your father wanted to come tonight, she finally said. He didn't think he'd be welcome. He probably wouldn't have been, I acknowledged. Not yet. She nodded, accepting this. He's found a job teaching business courses at a community college. It's different from what he was used to, but I think he's finding some purpose in it. I made a non-committal sound, not ready to express interest in my father's redemption narrative. We sold the house in Sacramento, she continued. It was too big, too expensive. We have a small place now. Nothing fancy, but it's enough. We stopped at a corner, waiting for the light to change. Around us, the city continued its evening choreography, indifferent to our small drama. Why did you come tonight, Mom? I asked directly, tired of the small talk. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. Because I'm proud of you, Vanessa. Not in that performative way. Parents often are, claiming credit for their children's accomplishments. I'm proud of the woman you've become despite what we did to you. She took a shaky breath. And because I miss you. Every day. The light changed, but neither of us moved. I can't give you what you want, I said gently. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Too much was broken. I know, she said, and I could see she meant it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Vanessa. Just the possibility of some kind of relationship, whatever you're comfortable with, on your terms. As we resumed walking, I considered her words. The idea of having my parents back in my life, even peripherally, filled me with complicated emotions. But there was something else too, a recognition that holding them permanently at bay required energy I'd rather direct elsewhere, toward my work, toward the life I was building, toward the future, rather than the past. I can't promise anything, I said finally. But maybe coffee, sometime, not right away. It was a small concession, less than she hoped for, but more than she expected. The relief in her eyes was palpable. That would be more than we deserve, she said softly. As we circled back toward the gallery where my grandfather would be waiting to drive me home, I realized something important. The power dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the daughter seeking approval, struggling to meet expectations. I was a woman who had found her voice, her purpose, her place in the world. Whatever relationship might eventually form between us would be built on that new foundation, or it wouldn't be built at all. On the morning of my 29th birthday, 2 years after the revelation that had changed everything, I woke early in my Pacific Heights apartment, now thoroughly my own in every sense. I'd repainted, rearranged, filled the space with artwork and books and objects that reflected who I'd become. The second bedroom remained my studio, though I'd upgraded the equipment as my career flourished. The Hidden World series had exceeded everyone's expectations, winning a prestigious children's book award and securing my reputation in the publishing industry. I was working on a new project now, a graphic novel for young adults about a girl discovering her family's complicated history, reclaiming pieces of herself that had been hidden away. I padded to the kitchen in bare feet, started the coffee maker, and opened the sliding glass door to the small balcony. The morning fog was just beginning to lift, revealing glimpses of the bay, the bridge, the city awakening below. I loved these quiet moments, the peaceful solitude that no longer felt like loneliness, but like a chosen companion. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from my grandfather. Happy birthday, Vanessa. Dinner at 7? I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Our weekly dinners had become a cherished ritual, sometimes at his home in Pacific Heights, sometimes at favorite restaurants, occasionally at my apartment where I'd discovered an unexpected joy in cooking. I scrolled through other birthday messages, from Olivia, from colleagues at Chronicle, from the small but significant circle of friends I'd cultivated over the past 2 years, and one from my mother. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Thinking of you today. Love, Mom. Our relationship had evolved in small, careful steps. Coffee every few months had gradually expanded to occasional lunches. We didn't discuss the past much. There was nothing more to say about the betrayal that neither of us could change, but instead focused on the present, on finding ways to know each other as the people we were now rather than the roles we'd once occupied. My father remained more distant, our contact limited to brief, awkward conversations when I occasionally spoke to my mother by phone. The breach there was deeper, the trust more thoroughly destroyed. I didn't know if we would ever rebuild anything meaningful, but I'd made peace with that uncertainty. As promised, my grandfather picked me up at 7, driving us to a small, elegant restaurant in North Beach that had become one of our favorites. The maitre d' greeted us by name, leading us to the corner table Edward preferred for its privacy and view of the bustling street outside. 29, he mused after we'd ordered, raising his glass in a toast. How does it feel? I considered the question seriously. Good. Settled somehow, like I'm finally comfortable in my own skin. He nodded, understanding. The books are doing well? Better than I ever imagined. The publisher wants to option the movie rights. His eyebrows rose. That's impressive. Will you do it? I'm considering it, I said. I want to make sure they understand the vision. That it's not just about magic and adventure, but about seeing beneath the surface of things, finding truth even when it's difficult. They'd be fools to ignore your input, he said with the unwavering confidence that had become such a steady source of support. You know the heart of the story better than anyone. We chatted through dinner about my projects, about his business, now increasingly managed by his executive team as he gradually stepped back, about books we'd read and exhibitions we'd attended. The easy rhythm of conversation that had developed between us was one of the unexpected gifts of the past 2 years. After the dessert plates had been cleared away, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small wrapped package. Happy birthday, he said, sliding it across the, table. I unwrapped it carefully to find a jewelry box. Inside was a delicate gold pendant, an artist's palette with tiny colored stones representing paint dabs. It's beautiful, I said sincerely, lifting it from the box. Thank you. Turn it over, he instructed. On the back, a small inscription. Truth reveals, art heals. I felt tears prick my eyes. You had this made? He nodded. I wanted something that represented both your journey and your gift. The way you've transformed pain into beauty. I fastened the necklace around my neck, touching the pendant gently. I'll treasure it. There's something else I want to discuss with you, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. A proposal of sorts. What kind of proposal? I asked, curious. I've been thinking about legacy, he said carefully. About the future of Prescott Holdings, and about the kind of impact I want my work to have beyond commercial real estate development. I nodded, encouraging him to continue. I'm establishing a foundation, the Prescott Arts Initiative. Its mission will be to provide studio space, grants, and mentorship to young artists who lack the resources to develop their talents, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. My breath caught, understanding immediately the significance of what he was proposing. A way to transform what had happened to me into something that could help others, creating opportunity where there had been obstacle, support where there had been struggle. I'd like you to be involved, he continued, not just as a beneficiary of the initial endowment, but as a director, someone who can help shape the vision, identify the artists who could most benefit, create the kind of support system you didn't have. I stared at him, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness behind the proposal. I don't know what to say. I'm honored. And yes, absolutely yes. His face relaxed into a smile. I was hoping you'd say that. We can begin the formal process. Next week, setting up the board, defining the parameters, establishing the funding mechanisms. As we left the restaurant, walking arm in arm toward his car, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a circle drawing closed, creating space for new beginnings. Will you tell your mother about the foundation? He asked as we drove back toward Pacific Heights. I considered the question. Yes, I think so. She's been trying in her way. This isn't about her or what happened anyway. It's about creating something meaningful from it all. He nodded, understanding as always. When we reached my apartment building, he insisted on walking me to my door, an old-fashioned courtesy I'd come to appreciate rather than resist. Thank you, I said as we stood outside my apartment. Not just for dinner, for everything. He embraced me warmly. You never needed rescuing, Vanessa. You just needed the truth. Everything else you've built yourself. After he left, I stood at my windows looking out at the city lights, touching the pendant at my throat. Truth reveals. Art heals. Simple words that encompassed so much of what I'd learned, what I'd lived, what I hoped to create going forward. 2 years ago, I had stood in this same spot, devastated by betrayal, uncertain of my place in the world, trying to reconcile the person I thought I was with the reality that had been revealed. Now I stood here transformed, not by wealth or privilege or even by artistic success, but by the painful, necessary journey of becoming fully myself, of claiming not just what had been taken from me, but what I could give back to the world. The foundation would be a beginning, not an endpoint. A way of ensuring that other young artists wouldn't have to struggle as I had, wouldn't have to defer their dreams for survival, wouldn't have to doubt their worth or their voice. The next morning, I met with a real estate agent about a property I'd been considering, a small but light-filled commercial space south of Market that could be converted into studios for emerging artists. The first tangible step toward the foundation's mission, funded by my own resources rather than my grandfather's. As we toured the space, I could already envision it transformed, walls removed to create open workspace, north-facing windows maximizing natural light, communal areas where artists could gather, collaborate, support each other's growth. What time frame are you thinking for renovations? The agent asked as we finished the tour. As soon as possible, I replied. I want this open by the end of the year. That evening, I worked late in my studio, finalizing illustrations for the graphic novel. The protagonist, a girl named Tessa, was discovering hidden rooms in her grandmother's house, each one revealing pieces of family history that had been concealed for generations. Not a direct retelling of my own story, but inspired by the truth that had reshaped my life, that understanding our past, however painful, is essential to claiming our future. My phone rang, interrupting my concentration. The screen showed my mother's name, an unusual occurrence as our communications were typically planned in advance. Mom, I answered, setting down my pen. Is everything okay? Yes, everything's fine, she assured me quickly. I saw the announcement about the Prescott Arts Initiative. Your grandfather's office sent out a press release this morning. I smiled, unsurprised by Edward's efficiency. Yes, we're launching it next month. I'll be serving as a director. It's a wonderful idea, she said, genuine, admiration in her voice. Using what happened to help other young artists. It's redemptive. The word hung between us, laden with meaning. Redemption had been a complicated concept in our slowly rebuilding relationship, something she sought, but I had been reluctant to grant too easily. It feels right, I said simply, creating opportunity from what was taken. I'm proud of you, Vanessa, she said softly. Not that my pride matters, but I am. So very proud of who you've become. 2 years ago, those words would have felt hollow, even manipulative. Now I could accept them for what they were, a mother's genuine admiration for her daughter's strength, her resilience, her capacity to transform pain into purpose. Thank you, I said, and meant it. After we hung up, I returned to my drawing table to Tessa's story unfolding beneath my hands. In the illustration I was working on, she stood in a hidden room filled with light, surrounded by fragments of the past, but facing resolutely toward an open door, toward whatever came next. I worked until the city lights began to fade into dawn, lost in the flow of creation, in the joy of bringing imagined worlds into being. When I finally set down my pen, stretching tired shoulders, I felt the satisfying exhaustion that comes from meaningful work, from being exactly where you're meant to be, doing precisely what you were born to do. I moved to the windows, watching the first pale light of morning touch the bay, the fog lifting to reveal the day ahead. The necklace my grandfather had given me caught the light, reminding me of his words. Truth reveals. Art heals. In the end, that was the story I was living, the story I was telling through my work, the story that would continue to unfold in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Not a fairy tale of instant transformation or easy redemption, but a human story of gradual healing, of hard-won wisdom, of finding beauty, even in brokenness. The betrayal that had once defined me had become just one chapter in a much larger narrative, important but no longer central, a turning point rather than an end point. What mattered now was everything that came after, the truth I chose to live, the art I created from that truth, the help I could offer to others navigating their own difficult revelations. As the sun rose fully over San Francisco, illuminating the city I'd come to love as truly my own, I made a silent promise to myself, to honor both the pain and the possibility of my journey, to remember always that our truest wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we create, in what we give, in who we become. I turned away from the window, toward my drawing table, toward the work that waited, toward the day and the life that were mine to shape.